In a review, we've talked about a ratio is used to compare two numbers, like wins or losses. And that a proportion is an equation that states two ratios are equivalent. 3 wins to 5 losses is equivalent to 6 wins and 10 losses. Now, in this section in 9.1, we're going to be discussing percents and fractions. So we will be using the same type of rules that we use for ratios and proportions. The word percent means per 100. You can remember that percent means per 100 by thinking of how many cents there are in a dollar. So, percent is a ratio whose denominator is 100. For example, 16%, that in a fraction is 16 over 100. In example 2, 25% is 25 over 100. And number 2, percents can be written as fractions by writing the number as a ratio with the denominator over 100. So again, think of percent, whatever number over 100. So in example 1, we have 55%. So 55%, we're going to put that over 100. But as always, we are going to reduce. So we would simplify this to 11 over 20. So for number 2, 50% is 50 over 100, and you can do that in your head. We reduce that to 1/2. Last would be 87%, 87 over 100. We try to see if we cannot simplify that, so that stays the same. So in number 3, fractions can be written as percents by finding an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100. So for example, say you had a quiz. You had 5 questions on your quiz. You got all 5 of them right. You made 100. Okay, your neighbor only got 4 out of 5 right. So we're going to determine what your neighbor's score is. So 4 out of 5, we're going to set that up in a proportion. We can see that 5 times 20 is 100, so 4 times 20 is 80. So now as we look at example 3, 3 out of 4, we're going to ask to find the percent of 3 out of 4. Oh, excuse me, I need to go back and do 4 out of 5 is 80%. 3 out of 4, you set it up as an equivalent fraction. So 24%. Okay, so let's recap. Percent means out of 100. If you're asked to change a fraction to a percent, set it up as a proportion and solve it. So fractions can be written as percents by finding an equivalent fraction with the denominator of 100. Now, in another example 4, to find the percent of a number, write the percent as a fraction and multiply. So we have 60% of 75. Of, as you can remember, means to multiply. So if I've got 60%, I'm going to take 60 over 100. But before I use that number, I'm going to simplify that to 3/5. Then I'm going to multiply that times 75 because it is 3/5. Excuse me, it's 60%, which is 3/5 of 75. And before I multiply, I can simplify. 3 times 15 is 45. So 60% of 75 is 45. Go back to make sure that your answer makes sense. If you get something larger than 75, then your answer is incorrect because it is percent. Okay, so 20% of 40. 40% of 40 is 8. This last one you can do in your head, but I'm just going to show you the steps, using the steps that we've been using. Number 5, 24% of tennis rackets sold in a sporting goods store cost $50 or more. What percent of the tennis rackets cost less than $50? So if 24% costs more, what percent of the tennis rackets cost less? So in this problem, you just take 100 minus 24, 76. So 76% of the rackets cost less than $50. Last page. Number 6, in your class, 8 out of 20 students scored 80% or better on the exam. What percent of the students scored 80% or better? So in our word problem, if we have 8 out of 20 students scored 80%, what percent of the students scored 80% or better? Set that up in a proportion. Now, usually when you want to simplify, it's to help you. But if you can do this mentally, I would just leave this right here, because 20 times 5 is 100, so 8 times 5 is 40. So 40% of the class scored 80% or better on their exam of the students. During an election, 112 out of 200 students in the 7th grade class voted for Lupe for class president. What percent of students did not vote for Lupe? So the first thing we can do is set it up. 112 out of 200 voted for him. Again, you can simplify if you want to, if you need to, but you don't need to, because you can do this mentally. 200 divided by 2 is 100. So 112 divided by 2 is 56. So this shows that 56% of the students voted for Lupe. But the question was, how many did not? So you're going to take 100%, you're going to subtract the 56 that voted for him, and you would have 44. So 44% of the students did not vote for Lupe.